So to go ahead and set up the portable glass shop, first you want to start with the grids, and mine are already pre-numbered. It comes with numbers in the packaging, and that's just kind of a roadmap, so when you want to put different components in different places, it's easy to know where you want to put them. So I'm going to go ahead and just put my boards together. They just literally go one on top of the other. Make sure they're seated together well. And then the first piece I'm going to put on is called a squaring fence, and that will go into the center of the board in the second cell up. I'm going to press that down firmly. I'm going to put the squaring block in the center at the very top, and then the bar in. So now I have the basic setup for the portable glass shop. The fence extension, so I'm going to put it on here, making sure that it's touching the squaring fence. I already have my metric ruler on here, and it's already calibrated, but if you wanted to switch rulers, it's easy enough to do. You just unscrew the wing nuts a little bit to remove this ruler. And if I wanted to put the inches on, I can. What I would do first is go ahead and put my ruler underneath. This big ruler has an exact end of a 0. And the next thing I'm going to put on is called a cutter gauge. You can see it has a short side and a long side. The long side will go on the side of the bar that I'm going to cut on. I'm right-handed, so I cut on the right side of the bar. This is going to take the measurement from the side of my Toyo cutting head to where the wheel will hit my bar. All I'm going to do is measure over to 2 inches. Then I can adjust where this ruler is so the 1-inch lines line up. And then I can tighten down my ruler. Now this ruler I use just for approximates, so if I'm going to cut a sheet of glass in half, or I want to cut it to 5 inches, 8 inches, I'm going to do it that way. If I want to get some really exact measurements, I'm going to make sure that I use my regular ruler and my cutter gauge. Now that I have that lined up, I'm going to go ahead and set my first measurement. And actually I'm going to work metric since I'm over here in the UK. I'm going to go ahead and put my cutter gauge back on, and I will go ahead and push this over to 40 millimeters. So again, using my cutter gauge to take the allowance for the cutter head, pushing my glass stop over to the end of the ruler. I now have this set for 40 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and set a second glass stop by just lining them up here and then tightening that down and just moving it right up here. And by setting up 2 glass stops, you're going to avoid a pivot point. If I didn't have the second glass stop, it's too easy for my glass to go back and forth, and it's really important to make sure that I have even strips. So you notice that I have a gap down here on the bottom. I do that because really all I need is the one hand to hold and stabilize my glass up against the glass stops and keep my strip nice and straight and even. It doesn't necessarily have to go onto the bottom of the squaring fence. I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 strips out of this. Aside. You can see by setting up 2 glass stops and cutting right up against that bar, I have 2 absolutely perfect strips. And perfect strips are probably the most important thing you can learn to cut if you want to do geometric pieces, because if you have perfect strips, you can make perfect squares, perfect diamonds, perfect hexagons, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and take my first strip, and I'm going to go ahead now and square off the edge. And that's just removing a little extra to make sure that there is no variation on the end. And now all I have to do is push my strip over to my glass stop, and I can cut some perfect squares from this. Now you notice now I don't have a gap down at the bottom, and that's because this piece of glass is much shorter. So I want to stabilize it up against the squaring fence and onto my glass stop. coming off of the piece of glass onto the scoring fence. The scoring fence is made out of a reinforced plastic. It's not going to ever damage your cutter, so you don't have to worry about that. You can score edge to edge really easily. A little trick, if you have trouble going to the very edge of your glass and you're kind of getting little dog ears on the end, you can take a piece of glass, it's the same type of glass, same thickness, put it right up above, and you can start your score on that other piece of glass. That's how you cut your perfect squares. And you know they're perfect if you take one of your squares and you do a quarter of a turn and they still line up perfectly. They're square squares. So you could do some really neat checkerboard patterns with those. The next thing I'll do with the square is to use what's called a fast angle. And this is a 90-degree fast angle, so you can see that a square fits down perfectly in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this right next to the bar. Now there's a little nub on this that goes face up. Nub is there so it can't slide underneath the bar. I'm going to take a glass stop, put it to the side, and push it over. So now this glass stop is acting to hold that square fast angle in place, so I don't have to focus on that. I can just focus on my piece of glass, making sure it's seated down in there really well. And I'm going to go ahead and score my glass in half. And it's kind of neat. So you can do all kinds of half square designs with the two triangles there. The next thing I'm going to bring up is how to cut diamonds out of the same strip, same size. So again, the 40mm strip. And in order to set my bar lock, which will hold my bar and I can adjust it, I first need to take a look at the recipe card. And what I'm using here today is the 2-panel Mini Surface Plus. I'm going to cut some 60-degree diamonds. So P15 just means that I need to put my bar lock, the little nub, into position 15 on my board. And then I need to set it. It says show 3 SM. SM just stands for small. So you can see that there are small and large demarcation lines on here. So what I want to do is move it so I just barely see that third demarcation line. And then I can tighten that up. Now I'm going to put the nub into position 15. And I'm not going to press it down into the board until I swing my bar over. Whenever you're using a bar lock or a glass stop, you want to make sure that these measurements go towards the outside of the board or away from the cutting bar. I'm going to go ahead and just pivot my bar over. Then I'm going to press it down. Now it's locked into place to do an exact 60-degree angle. I'm going to push my piece of glass forward. Now normally you want to use as little glass as possible, but on this very first piece I'm going to cut a little extra off because I'm going to use it to measure. Okay, so basically you just have to think of the diamond having 4 equal sides. This is the measurement that we want to take. So in order to take that measurement, I'm going to put it so it's down on the bottom of my squaring fence, and I'm going to flip it over. Okay. I'm going to take my cutter gauge again with the long side, the right side on the right side of the bar. Hold my piece of glass right there. I'm going to take a glass stop and put it right over here. Now I just hold the piece of glass with my finger because if I don't, the glass stop will pop the piece of glass up. Just going to set that over there. It's nice and snug in there. I can now remove the cutter gauge. And I'm going to put this piece of glass off to the side just in case I need to use it again for another measurement. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my first diamond. Now the first diamond I cut, I like to take it and put it right onto the Morton surface and make sure that the 4 points line up both horizontally and vertically. If all 4 points line up on the Morton surface, then I know I have a good diamond. From here, all I have to do is push it through to my glass stop again. So you can really count or cut an infinite amount of strips identical diamonds. Just want to make sure all your strips are the same width. So when you come up to your next strip of glass, you just cut off a very minimal amount to start it off. With your 60-degree diamonds, you can put them together. And whether you prefer to copper foil, lead came, or fuse, they fit together really nicely. Great for making snowflakes, ornaments, all kinds of things, poinsettias. You can see on a sample here, it's a little bit larger, but it's still the 60-degree diamond. Also, this is a 60-degree diamond here. You can see you can put them together in a little bit of a different formation, and you can have that cube-like structure. Also, on a piece like this, if you were building a window out of diamonds like this, eventually you're going to get to a point where you have an edge of a window and you need to cut a half of a diamond, and you want to keep it nice and accurate and in place. Same thing along the top of the window. Eventually you're going to have a straight stopping off point, and you're going to need to cut that in half. So I'm going to come back over here, put my bar back up into the 90-degree position. And there's two other fast angles that we didn't show earlier. There is a 60-degree and a 120-degree. And as you can see, the 120 fits right down in there perfectly, and the 60-degree fits right down in there perfectly. So just like the other ones, you want to put the nub up right up against the cutting bar, and I'm going to push that right over. Take my first diamond and cut it in half. My half diamonds there. Likewise, I can put my 120-degree. And cut that in half. So I have my half pieces both ways. It's kind of fun to do this type of triangle. It's an equilateral triangle, so you can fit them together in infinite ways, especially if you add multiple colors. Here's kind of an example of a little hexagon that I made with a whole bunch of leftover triangles from the sides of these pieces here. So you can always save those offcuts and do some really neat designs with those as well. So the last thing I'll touch on real quick is making a hexagon. So to make a hexagon, you need to start with a 60-degree diamond. So like with any shape that you cut, you should be able to take all your pieces and put them on edge, and they should line up really perfectly. When you have some perfect shapes like that, they'll fit together in a final design really well. So to make the hexagons, I'm going to use the 120-degree fast angle again. Okay. So the strip that I started off with was 40 millimeters. So what I'll do is I will put my ruler underneath my cutting bar, and I will put my 120-degree fast angle here. I'm going to measure 20 millimeters, which is half of my strip width, past this fast angle. I'm then going to set a glass stop to go to the end of the ruler. I'm going to move my fence extension out of the way, and I'll move this ruler out of the way. The next thing I'll do is go ahead and put a small piece of masking tape I'm going to slide the fast angle over to the glass stop. Now the fast angles can slide freely, so in order to hold it in place, I'm just going to use a little piece of masking tape. So again, I don't have to focus on it, I can just focus on my piece of glass. I'm going to put my 60-degree diamond in here. And I'll go ahead and score the one end, spin it, and score the other end. I'm going to break those off. And I have a hexagon. So I can cut plenty of hexagons off of this. And they'll all fit together perfectly.